We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
An immovable object and an unstoppable force. What happens when two worlds, in this case the legislative and executive, collide? What are the symptoms of Bidenomics and is political persecution distinctly un-American? All this and more on today's show. Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Today we examine the state of the GOP House, the state of the Union, the state of the economy, and political persecution. That's a lot of states. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. With the House of Representatives firmly in the grip of the Republican Party, President Biden has a unique opportunity to demonstrate that long-promised unity he assured America would be the hallmark of his terms in office, or term. But what if it's all just bluster? Well, we're joined by Liberty Nation's senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show, Tim Donner, to figure out what is the present relationship between the legislative and the executive during the time of Joe Biden. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
So tell me, the GOP, they have a slim majority, but it is still clearly a majority. Are we going to see Joe Biden working hand in hand with the lower chamber? Or was this all just sweet whispered words of a pillow talk inauguration for an expectant public?
Joe Biden will promote unity to the extent that it benefits his efforts at reelection. I think that's the answer, because it didn't serve his purposes to be bipartisan the last 2 years, where he had the trifecta, control of the House and Senate as well as the White House. Didn't serve his purposes then. It will serve his purposes now. I suspect, particularly on this the debt limit issue, that he's going to attempt to demagogue the issue as saying that Republicans want onerous spending cuts that will destroy people's lives. And the Republicans will counter by saying that, we're on the edge of fiscal doom, shall we say, with a $32 trillion debt limit that goes up by hundreds of millions of dollars every single week, unabated. So, this is a dance that we've seen in Washington before, where the establishment understandably says we have to pay our bills. We cannot be, we can't default because it will ruin our credit standing and all the cascading consequences from that. So we have to pay our bills at any cost, which then thwarts the idea that you can put any kind of limits on spending. And I'm talking about for both parties. But in terms of overall bipartisanship, I think there are some areas where there could actually be some agreement on some things, probably international issues more than anything else. But again, everything needs to be looked at through the lens of, does it benefit Joe Biden's reelection campaign?
So does that mean that the Republicans are not going to get anything, in your opinion, domestically for their base, or what they perceive that their base wants?
Virtually nothing. What they've gotten is an open amendment process demanded by the most conservative of Republicans as a pretext for their vote for Kevin McCarthy, famously first Speaker of the House. But it's benefiting a lot of left-wing Democrats too. Even Ilhan Omar saying that she's excited at the amendment process, particularly in one bill where there were like over 50 amendments offered because of the open process. So McCarthy has sort of unwittingly benefited the Democrats by doing that. But the other side of Biden, the advantage that he has that he didn't have the last 2 years, is that he can blame the Republican House for everything, because he's not going to blame his own party over the last 2 years, but now the Republicans have the House. He's going to blame them for stonewalling. He's going to blame them for shutting down, terrific progressive ideas that would otherwise pass, this sort of thing. So it'll be a Mexican standoff, if you're allowed to say that anymore. between the president and McCarthy. And I think these talks about the debt limit are nothing more than a stare down and a game of chicken to see, who relinquishes their control first.
It's interesting that you use the term the Mexican standoff there, which I do believe is still acceptable in most circles, because I kind of envisioned the situation with Kevin McCarthy. I don't know if you've seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, written by the great author and screenwriter William Goldman, starring Robert Redford and Paul Newman, in the very last scene where the Bolivian army is surrounding them, and they have this unique positivity of, what about Australia? And then they come out guns blazing, and obviously we know what happens to them. And it seems to me that Kevin McCarthy and his merry band of Republicans are pretty much in that situation, because all they've really got going forward into November 2024, it's to create a kind of a GOP persona that his party can present to the public. And that persona can either be the happy obstructionist persona, or principled but doomed. I'm not sure. What do you make of that idea?
Well, I think because of the fact that you've got different parties controlling the House and Senate, we can stipulate that virtually nothing's going to get done legislatively, which means the focus is going to be pretty much on the presidential race, whether Biden's going to run again. Apparently, Nikki Haley is now ready to announce her candidacy for the Republican nomination. Ron DeSantis seems sure to follow, probably Mike Pompeo, probably Mike Pence, and some others. And I think that persona that you're talking about is going to largely be established by who ends up on the top of the ticket in 2024, but the presidential candidate. But I think that whether it's DeSantis or Trump, we're still talking about a MAGA-dominated Republican Party, and the MAGA portion of the Republican caucus certainly flexed their muscles during the speakership election process. So that's going to largely define the party, I think, and the contrast will be as clear in 24 as it was in 20.
Okay, I think part of this fact that, as we both agree, that the Republicans really aren't going to be able to get very much done during this period. It's obstructionism or nothing. And this really does, I think, show how divided the nation is with its two parties. And when the founders set this whole thing up, did they anticipate such battles between the branches or between members within Congress?
I think they did. I think they definitely did. And they saw it as a feature, not a bug, because what they envisioned was a long, deliberative process for any kind of major legislative change or any change to the law. Anything that was a significant public policy change or introduction of a new public policy would necessarily need to have very broad consensus in the House, the Senate, and among the states, so that, unlike what the progressives think, where they want to just rush through anything that's sort of the new issue of the day, the point of the constitutional structure is to make major change very deliberative and reliant on very broad consensus.
So some would say in a conservative manner, Tim.
Well, for example, the Supreme Court, the so-called conservative justices are actually constitutionalists, as opposed to progressives who want to read things into the Constitution rather than read what the Constitution actually says.
Okay, we're talking with Tim Donner on the House GOP. After this short break, we'll be right back with Tim asking if America is on the wrong track. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five. produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner, joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five.